Hey guys, tonight we begin with a role that most people never asked for, never trained for, and certainly never got paid for: being a woman in the Middle Ages. And yes, while medieval life was no bed of roses for anyone, what with all the plague, famine, and spontaneous warfare, women were handed the short end of a very large, very splintery stick. From childbirth without anesthesia to laws written by people who thought menstruation was a sin, this is not a tale of dainty courtship and satin gowns. This is damp floors, unwashed husbands, and survival through sheer stubbornness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you've just been born. Congratulations. You're the newest, smallest, most screaming member of a medieval family who already has too many mouths to feed. And you're a girl. They were hoping for a boy, of course. That was always the first disappointment. You arrived in a room full of sweat, smoke, and screaming, where midwives barked prayers at your mother's thighs and occasionally spat on the floor for luck. No white linens, no gentle lullabies, just the warm splash of afterbirth on packed dirt and the sound of someone yelling to fetch Father Ambrose before it's too late. The fire barely warmed the cottage. Your mother was half conscious. Your father was nowhere in sight. And the midwife was already calculating how many of your fingers and toes would still be attached by morning. If you're lucky, and luck is something you'll need a great deal of, the cord was cut with a cleanish blade, and you were rubbed down with salt to keep the devils from slipping in through your soft skin. Salt stung. You cried. That was good. It meant you were alive and so far not entirely cursed. Your grandmother, if still living, might murmur a blessing and wave a dried herb at you. If she died last spring from the cough, a neighbor woman might step in, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a threat. Either way, you are now officially part of the human population. Congratulations again. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're not out of danger yet. In fact, you won't be for another 30 years, if you make it that far. The first 7 days of life were considered the most dangerous. That's why they rushed your baptism. Before you were even fully cleaned, someone dragged you to the church, still wrapped in blood and panic. Babies who died unbaptized were thought to linger in purgatory, which was unacceptable for any Christian mother with a conscience and a deep fear of limbo. So you were dunked in holy water faster than you could develop a proper immune system, and the priest pronounced you free of original sin, for now. Back at home, you were swaddled within an inch of your life. Not for comfort, but to ensure you didn't grow up crooked. Legs had to be straight, spine rigid, head rounded like a melon. You were bound like a miniature corpse and hung in a cradle above the hearth, so the smoke could harden your lungs. You breathed in soot and smolder for most of your infancy. It built character, or tuberculosis. Nursing was your next hurdle. If your mother had milk, you'd be pressed her breast every few hours and patted like a loaf of bread to make you burp. If she didn't, or if she died, which was common enough that people barely flinched, you might be given to a wet nurse, usually a slightly disgraced woman who needed the money and didn't mind swapping out her own dead infant for a paying customer. If no wet nurse was available, goat milk or chewed up bread mash might serve instead delivered, through rags or spoons or whatever wasn't already being used for soup. It was not ideal. You cried a lot. Everyone did. The house was always noisy. Older children screaming, the dog barking, your father swearing about taxes. People stepped over you, fed you in passing, prayed over you when you looked too still. If you made it to your first month, there might be a whispered acknowledgement that yes, perhaps you were meant to live. Maybe, but no one got too attached. You were not named until several days had passed, sometimes longer. Names were expensive in their own way. Invoking saints, committing to memory, placing a soul on the divine register. You might be named after your grandmother, or a saint with a feast day close to your birth. But if things went badly, and they often did, you would die before anyone remembered what it was. And if you did die, which happened to about half the babies born to peasant families, you were wrapped up in an old cloth and buried quickly, perhaps near the church, perhaps behind the barn. No marker, no ceremony, just a quiet muttering about God's will and another bowl of stew for the living. But you somehow did not die. You shrieked, you soiled, you suckled. You beat the odds for now, and your mother looked at your squished face and salt-crusted forehead and maybe, just maybe, smiled. Welcome to the world, little one. It only gets harder from here. Your first winter is not remembered, but it will mark you forever. There are no lullabies in this chapter, only drafts, cold ones, the kind that creep under the door like ghosts and wrap around your cradle like skeletal hands. You live in a one-room hut barely wider than your father's cart, shared by your parents, possibly your siblings, definitely a goat, and a variety of pests that regard you as a new addition to the buffet. The floor is packed earth, the ceiling leaks, and the walls weep. Moisture. At night, the cold is not a season. It is a character in the room, louder than your wails, crueler than your colic, and far less likely to leave. The fire helps, but not much. It is fed reluctantly with scraps of damp wood or dried animal dung, and its smoke clings to the air like a thick insult. Your cradle, a wooden trough hung by cords or nestled beside the hearth, absorbs this atmosphere like a sponge. Every blanket around you smells of smoke, mildew, and ancient milk, swaddled tight. You look less like a baby and more like a sausage being prepared for a religious fast. Your arms are pinned, your legs are wrapped, and, if you manage, to wriggle free, someone will tut, frown, and bind you tighter. Movement leads to deformity. They say, better to grow stiff and straight than free and crooked. If you catch a cold, and you will, there's no soft tissue or infant Tylenol waiting. There's instead your mother's thumb dipped in honey, your grandmother's opinion on basil, and a wet rag placed on your forehead with a prayer and a sigh. Fevers are fought with incantations and vinegar. Coughs are measured by how often you wake the household. If you cough blood, it is God's judgment. If you stop coughing, it is also God's judgment, but with a different outcome. Rats come at night. You don't see them, but they scurry by your cradle like whispering shadows. Mice climb the thatch above you and occasionally fall in, a tiny thud punctuating the darkness. Fleas are a permanent part of your bedding. You are bitten long before you can scratch. The goat sleeps nearby, warm and indifferent. Its presence is practical. It gives milk, sometimes warmth, and occasionally it urinates on your brother, which is the closest thing to entertainment anyone gets in January. Bathing is rare, and in winter, nearly fatal. No one dunks a baby in freezing water unless they want to see what color your lips turn before you die. Instead, you are wiped down with cloth, if you're lucky, or brushed off with straw if water is scarce. Your skin flakes, your scalp itches, and the crust behind your ears is considered harmless by medieval standards. Cleanliness is not next to godliness. Cleanliness is suspicious. Clean babies either have noble mothers or something to hide. Your cries are constant. They are not cute. They're not cooed over. They are tolerated like a creaking roof or a toothache, with the resigned endurance of people who know they cannot afford repairs. Your mother, already pregnant again, tries to feed you in between cooking, hauling water, and not collapsing from exhaustion. If she cannot nurse, you may be given cow's milk mixed with ashes or bread soaked in wine. If the cow is dead or dry, and the bread has been eaten, then God help you. Or don't. God's busy this season. Every hour you survive is another tiny miracle, though no one calls it that. Your father might glance at you once a day, frown, and say something about your nose. If he's a kind man, he He might tickle your chin with a callous finger. If he is not, he might ignore you entirely until you speak, or until you die, whichever comes first. Your siblings, if old enough, are more likely to poke you with a stick than sing to you. You are not the center of their world. You are a noise machine that occasionally vomits. Outside, the village is a frozen graveyard. Smoke curls from holes in crooked roofs, and thin women scrape frost from their door hinges with sticks. The priest coughs harder than the sinners, and the baker's wife wears the same cloak she wore to 3 funerals last year. Everyone looks gray. Everyone walks hunched. Everyone is waiting for spring with the kind of desperate patience normally reserved for death or harvest. And while you do not know it yet, this is the season that teaches your bones to ache. Your milestones are marked in survival, not celebration. You do not smile. You grimace through gas. You do not crawl. You squirm to avoid the dog's tail. You do not babble. You wheeze, but the months creep forward one miserable breath at a time. And if you are still alive when the mud thaws and the snow vanishes, they might lift you to the sunlight and marvel, not at how much you've grown, but at the fact that you remain. No one will write this down. There is no record of your first winter, no sketch of your bundled form or poem for your tiny hands. But it is here, in this wet, dark season, that you begin to understand, though you have no words yet, that the world is not made for your comfort. It is made to test your endurance. And you, despite every reason not to, are still here. You are now, by some reluctant consensus, a child, not a baby. Those cry and die. You, on the other hand, can walk in a straight line without falling into the hearth, and that makes you employable. You do not own toys, you do not have playdates, and no one asks about your favorite color. You are officially useful, which in medieval terms means someone somewhere is already shouting your name before the sun has risen. And you're about to find out that your fingers can carry buckets, your knees can kneel, and your little back can bend. Your day begins with cold, the kind that slaps you awake before the rooster even remembers to scream. You sleep on straw, under a blanket that smells of damp wool and older siblings. There is no privacy, no bedroom, just a communal human stew of feet, elbows, snores, and morning flatulence. If you're lucky, your shift is long enough to cover your legs. If you're not, you curl your toes and hope the frostbite chooses someone else. There's a chamber pot, yes, but it's full, and you don't have the authority to empty it without being volunteered to clean it too. So you creep outside, barefoot on frozen mud, and hope not to step on anything cursed. Breakfast is theoretical. If there is bread, you get a bite. If there is porridge, you fight for the crust at the bottom of the pot. Your mother is already grinding grain with hands that never seem to stop shaking. Your father, if present, is mumbling about the price of salt. Someone always has a cough. Someone else always needs prayers. No one is well. But the fire is lit, and the chickens are already judging you. It is time to work. Your chores begin with the bucket. The bucket is your oldest enemy and your closest companion. It is wooden, warped, and leaks in at least 2 places. You fill it from the stream that is technically water, but more accurately a mixture of rain, animal runoff, and the tears of overworked peasants. You carry it back, staggering, splashing half of it onto your legs and the other half onto your already soaked shoes. If your shoes have holes, and they do, you squish with every step if you fall. And you are yelled at, slapped, and sent back. Water must be fetched, always. Next comes firewood, or what passes for it. Twigs, sticks, peat bricks, or in especially festive times, dried dung shaped by hand and left to bake in the sun. You do not get gloves. You do not get thanks. You are expected to know the difference between damp moss and something that will actually burn, even if no one taught you. Your reward for success is not praise, but being sent out again, because now you've proven you can do it. Then comes livestock. You are too small to lift a pig, but just the right size to be kicked by one. The chickens run from you. The goats headbutt you. The dog only listens to your father and occasionally steals your bread. You scatter feed, you collect eggs, you clean messes no one acknowledges. You learn that manure is not a punishment. It is a normal texture of life. You learn that mud does not wash out. You learn that if the cow stops giving milk, you might be blamed even if the cow hasn't. Look you in the eye since last spring. At midday, the sun is no warmer, but your body is sore enough to forget about cold. You knead dough if there's flour, stir broth if there are bones, and pick worms out of cabbage if someone remembered to grow it. Your siblings either help or sabotage you, depending on their mood and birth order. You have learned to dodge elbows and duck wooden spoons. You eat standing up because sitting is for people who have finished something. You have never finished anything in your life. Your lessons are not written. You cannot read. You're taught by repetition, by scolding, and by watching the older women do things faster than you thought humanly possible. You try to mimic the rhythm. Grind, sweep, stir, wring, pray. You watch your mother scrub cloth until her fingers bleed. You watch your grandmother mutter to herself while twisting thread from sheep's wool. You learn not to ask questions. Curiosity is for monks. You are not a monk. You are a girl with a job and no wage. And then there is the chapel, every week or more if things are going badly. You are marched to the stone church on the edge of the village, where a priest with breath like spoiled turnips tells you that you are sinful, even now, even at 6, even if you only just learned what sin means. You do not understand the Latin, but you understand the tone. You are unworthy. You are a danger to yourself and others. You must obey. You must kneel. You must fear. You must never question why God seems to love you less than boys. You grow slowly, crookedly. You have a scab on one knee that never goes away. Your hair is matted. Your teeth are already soft. You are the same tunic all year, patched, stained, shrunken. When it rains, you smell like mildew. When it doesn't, you smell like smoke. No one comments. That is simply how girls smell. Your arms are scratched from brambles. Your shoulders ache from carrying things no child should carry. Your voice is rarely heard, unless it is to answer yes, mother, or no, father, or I'm sorry. You learn not to say, I can't. You learn to say nothing at all. And through it all, you survive. You grow. Not strong, exactly, but persistent. You learn the names of herbs, the moods of chickens, the sound of different types of coughs. You learn to spot mold, to hide crumbs, to fake sleep. You learn that life is not about joy. It is about continuity. You are not the center of your family, your village, or your world. You are a thread in a tapestry that will never be finished. Your job is not to shine. Your job is not to break. Your job is to hold. You are, by medieval definition, a child. And the work has only just begun. It doesn't happen in the spring like the priest said it might. Nor does it arrive with any grand ceremony, no banner waving, no celestial trumpet to announce your entry into womanhood. It arrives in winter, of course it does, damp, cold, hungry winter, while you're hauling firewood with frozen fingers and praying that the blister on your heel doesn't turn into something worse. One moment, you are a grimy, overworked, underfed child. The next, your thighs are sticky with blood and you are convinced that you are dying. You tell no one at first, not out of wisdom, but out of panic. You think it's punishment, a sin you don't remember committing. Maybe the time you stole a pear. Maybe when you thought the priest's voice sounded like a goat's. Maybe it's because you wish your brother would fall in the river, and then he did. Either way, the shame rushes in faster than the blood does. You hide behind the hut. You wipe yourself with leaves. You cry without sound. There is no guidance, no ceremony, no celebration. You were not warned. No one thought you were old enough. No one thought you were worth a warning. When your mother finds out, she is not gentle. She scolds you for bleeding on the shift, for using the wrong leaves, for looking confused. She is tired. You are an inconvenience. This is not her first bleeding girl. She gives you a cloth, old linen, rough, already stained, and shows you how to fold it into a triangle. She tells you to sit still and not move too much. She does not explain why this is happening. She does not explain how long it will last. She does not tell you that it will come. Again and again and again, she does not tell you that you're now on the market. Because that's what this is, really. Your blood has made you merchandise. Before, you were a daughter, a laborer, an obligation. Now, you are a future womb. You are a potential bargain in a marriage deal. You are livestock with value. Your bleeding makes you real to men, even the ones who have never said your name, especially them. You catch them looking at you now, differently. The same faces who saw you as a child now glance sideways, measuring, speculating. You are not quite a woman, not yet, but you have entered the negotiation stage. The church is no help. Father Ambrose, who smells of wine and old leather, speaks of purity and sin in the same breath. Blood, he says, is the mark of Eve. It is the curse upon all women. It is why you must cover your head in church. It is why you cannot touch holy things or speak loudly or laugh during sermons. You must be silent. You must be still. You must be ashamed. You nod. You kneel. You feel the heat of your own body like it's something you should apologize for. At home, the work does not lessen. No one says, "You're bleeding, sit down." They say, "You're old enough now, go milk the cow." You fetch water with cramping legs. You knead dough with trembling arms. You scrub blood from your own garments with ash and cold water, trying to hide the stains before anyone else sees them. The cloths you use are rinsed and dry behind the oven. They do not dry well. They stiffen. They stink. You use them anyway. Your body changes painfully without your consent. Your chest aches. Your hips widen. Your skin breaks out in rashes. You itch. You bloat. Your appetite surges and disappears like the moon. You cry for no reason and are called dramatic. You laugh and are told to stop acting like a harlot. There's no in-between. There's no kindness. There's only the expectation that you will now behave properly, even though no one has explained what that means. You are no longer allowed to sit with the boys, even if they are your cousins. You are no longer permitted to go out alone, even to the well. You must avoid eye contact with men. You must not speak unless spoken to. You must lower your eyes and carry yourself with modesty, a word that changes meaning depending on who is using it. Your new job is to vanish in plain sight, to be helpful, humble, and invisible, except when someone needs something, and then you must appear instantly. Your friends, the girls you shared lives with, the ones who taught you how to spit properly, are bleeding too, one by one. You huddle in corners and whisper, comparing cramps and stains and fears. One girl swears she saw a witch in the woods who can stop the bleeding forever. Another claims that if you drink nettle tea at dawn, your pain will be lighter. Someone else suggests stuffing sheeps will inside your shift. No one knows what they're doing. You're all drowning in secrecy and superstition, pretending you're fine. There is no word for consent. There is no word for privacy. There is no word for relief. Only the slow understanding that your body is no longer yours. It belongs to the cycle now. The blood, the work, the ritual. Every month a new humiliation. Every month a new reminder that you're meat on a slow spit, roasting toward marriage, pregnancy, death, or all three. Still, you endure. Because endurance is what you do. You bleed, you work, you smile when told to, you hide the cloths and the tears and the resentment. You wrap yourself in silence. You become your mother, and you learn to pray not for it to stop, because it won't, but for no one to ever notice when it starts again. You don't remember when the conversation started, because they never started with you. They started between your father and someone else's uncle, somewhere near a fire and a cup of something strong. Your name wasn't mentioned at first, just your dowry, or rather, the vague hope that one existed. A few chickens, maybe a bit of land if luck held, or a barrel of dried fish if your uncle remembered to bring it downriver this year. You're not a person in these talks. You are a transaction, a negotiation involving livestock, fertility, and who has the stronger roof. By the time someone tells you that you are engaged, the matter has already been settled, blessed, and possibly toasted. You are told between chores, with the same tone your mother uses when reminding you to sweep behind the hearth. You'll marry the miller's son come spring, she says, as if that's the weather forecast. You nod because what else can you do? Crying is useless. Screaming gets you slapped. Refusing would be like telling the sun not to rise. This is not a story where choices exist. This is a barter system in which your blood has finally turned a profit. You have met the miller's son exactly twice. Once at market, where he threw a pebble at a dog and missed. Once during a festival, where he drank too much and vomited in a barrel of apples. He is older than you by 5 winters and smells like yeast and nervous sweat. He does not look at you when you cross paths. When he does, it is the kind of look one gives a mule. Useful, dull, tolerated. You're not supposed to feel anything for him. That would complicate things. You are supposed to submit, obey, and bear sons. Emotions are for poetry, and poetry is for monks. Your dowry is discussed in whispers and public shame. It is not generous. Your family is poor. You have no inheritance, no gold, no heirloom linens. You are told firmly that your virtue will have to make up the difference. Virtue, in this case, means being untouched, unseen, unsmiling. You are examined the way a man might inspect a fence. Not for beauty, but for damage. Every sideways glance you gave a boy, every laugh too loud, every hem too short is now a mark against you. You must prove yourself clean, even if no one ever explained how the dirt got there. As the wedding approaches, you are scoured like a pot. Your hair is combed with vinegar. Your nails are scrubbed with salt. Your shift is bleached in sour milk. You are plucked, pinched, and patted by women who do not smile and do not ask your opinion. You are told to be grateful. You are told this is your fate. You are told this is better than becoming a nun, or worse, an old maid, a creature of ridicule, pity, and loose teeth. At least this way, someone will feed you. Someone will roof you. Someone will claim you, even if they never actually listen to your voice. The wedding itself is a blur of noise, breath, and obligation. You are your second best shift, the one with fewer holes. Your hair is braided with string. Your shoes pinch. The church smells of damp stone and crushed herbs. The priest talks at length about duty, obedience, and the holy role of the wife. You understand none of it. You are too busy sweating, blinking, trying not to faint. The miller's son stands beside you like a lump of dough waiting to rise. He doesn't say your name. You don't. Say his. The only words you exchange are "I will," which you're coached to say with a steady voice and a downcast gaze. Afterwards, there is bread and ale. Someone brings cheese. Someone plays a lute out of tune. You are pinched on the arm by old women who tell you to be patient and fertile. You are kissed on the cheek by men who smell like pig fat. Someone makes a joke about your wedding night. Everyone laughs, but you. You are now property with a smile. You nod. You serve. You disappear. And then comes the night. You are led to the miller's house, or your family's barn, or wherever the sleeping arrangements have been deemed holy enough. You are not asked if you are ready. You are not told what will happen. You know, of course. You've heard the older girls whisper. You've watched the animals. You've felt the dread blooming in your belly. The bed is rough. The room is cold. The miller's son is clumsy, silent, and smells like onions. You close your eyes and think of saints. In the morning, you are no longer a girl. You are a wife. You are expected to rise before the sun, bake bread, feed animals, clean messes, and act like nothing has changed. But everything has. Your name is different now. Your tasks are heavier. Your expectations are infinite. You are no longer allowed to visit home without permission. You are told to bear children quickly. You are told to be quiet more often. You are told to pray harder, in case God still has doubts about your usefulness. There is no joy in this chapter. No first kiss under moonlight. No warm hands. No soft murmur of shared dreams. There is only function. And beneath that, silence. And beneath that, a small, shrinking corner of yourself that remembers what it felt like to laugh without consequence. That part will go quiet soon. That part will learn to fold itself in a laundry and stew in obedience. That part will die last. And yet, you endure, because that is the one vow no one made you speak, but everyone expects you to keep. Marriage is not a destination. It is a curriculum. You have not been crowned or elevated. You've been enrolled in a full-time, unpaid apprenticeship called wifery, a holy vocation that requires no literacy, no choice, and no exit strategy. You do not receive a handbook. You receive command size, and the occasional demonstration from women whose hands are permanently red from lie and whose backs have forgotten what straightness feels like. Your textbooks are burnt bread crusts and weeping. Ale barrels. Your exams are measured in silence, fatigue, and whether your husband's socks ever run out of holes. Your days now begin earlier and end later. You rise before light to stoke a fire that never wants to live. You prod it with a stick that used to be your favorite toy. You blow on it until your lips sting. If the fire dies, breakfast dies with it, and that means hunger, and hunger means complaints, and complaints mean glares, and glares mean blame, and blame always lands on the wife. There is no winning in this game. There is only not losing too obviously. The bread must be made. Not just any bread, the right bread. You must mix the flour that you didn't grind with water from the stream you walked half a mile to collect, using salt you ration by instinct, not by scale. The dough must rise, but not too much. The oven must be hot, but not scorching. The crust must be crisp, but not burned. The inside must be soft, but not raw. If the bread fails, it's your fault. If it succeeds, it's God's grace. Either way, you will make another tomorrow. Beer is not a luxury. Beer is water that won't kill you. You are expected to brew it, whether or not you've ever seen it brewed before. You are told it is simple. Just boil the grain, steep the herbs, cool it, ferment it, seal it, and pray. If the beer turns sour, you will be blamed. If it is too weak, the men will scoff. If it is too strong, the priest will frown. No one will teach you the right way, because no one agrees what that is. But everyone will know when you've done it wrong. The laundry is constant. You scrub tunics that reek of sweat, soup, and fear. You use ash and lye and cold water. Your hands crack open, your fingernails blacken. The soap stings your cuts. You beat the cloth on stones that bite your knuckles. You haul it home and hang it in smoky corners where it will never fully dry. And yet it must always be clean. Always. Even when nothing else in this life is. Your husband expects obedience. He does not define it. He simply assumes it. You do not argue with him. You agree, quickly, gently, with downcast eyes. If he is cruel, you say he's tired. If he is lazy, you say he's burdened. If he drinks, you say the beer is strong. If he raises a hand, you say it was an accident. The neighbors hear. They say nothing. Sometimes your mother hears. She tells you to be still, that it is normal, that it will pass, that it is better than being alone. You are watched by everyone, by older women who evaluate your posture, your tone, your hemline, by the priest's wife who notes how often you attend Mass, by the midwife who knows when you're due even before you do, by girls younger than you, measuring your every move to guess what's waiting for them. You are never alone. Not even in the privy, where the door doesn't latch and the walls don't close properly. Privacy is for saints and nobles. You are a wife. You are visible. You are judged. Sex is not love. It is another chore, another duty, another silence you must keep. You do not initiate. You do not resist. You pray to become pregnant because pregnancy is the only excuse for saying no. You pray not to become pregnant because pregnancy is also pain, risk, and possibly death. You pray to saints whose faces are cracked and fading. You pray for relief, then feel guilty. You do not expect pleasure. You do not expect kindness. You expect the creak of the bed, the weight of a man, the sound of sleep that follows, not yours but his. Your calendar is a wheel of obligations. Fast days, feast days, market days, laundry days, brewing days. There's no time off, no holidays, only different versions of labor. You memorize the signs of spoiled grain, of rising dough, of your husband's temper. You memorize prayers for fertility, safety, forgiveness, endurance. You repeat them under your breath while stirring soup, while mending socks, while squatting in the garden with dirt in your nails and hope rotting slowly in your ribs. You are not praised. You are not thanked. You are not asked how you feel because feelings are not part of the curriculum. You are expected to be useful, cheerful, invisible, indestructible. If you cry, do it quietly. If you break, do it while holding something fragile, so the noise will mask your voice. You are not taught to speak for yourself. You are taught to last longer than whatever pain finds you. That is the lesson. That is the entire lesson. And still, you endure. You bake. You brew. You bend. You don't ask what happened to the girl you were before the apron was tied. She's not gone. She's hiding somewhere behind your hands, your spine, your silence. She's watching. She's learning. She'll be needed again soon. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not because it's particularly strong. Everything smells in the village, but because this one is yours now. It's a distinct blend of mold, boiled onions, wool, unwashed feet, and a vague undercurrent of something you can't quite place, but will soon come to recognize as wet thatch and disappointment. This is your new home, not built for comfort, not arranged for beauty, not even chosen by you. But here it is, yours by marriage, by law, and by the unspoken contract that comes with being someone else's legal burden. The house is small, smaller than you hoped, even though you didn't dare hope. 2 rooms if you're being generous, 1 if you're honest. The main space contains the hearth, the table, the bench, the bed, the chest, the dog, and the man. The second space, if it exists, is a lean-to made of rotting wood and pessimism, where the animals sometimes sleep and where you will sometimes sleep when a man has been drinking too much. There are gaps between the planks where wind whistles in like a judgmental ant. There is no glass in the windows. Glass is for churches. You have linen soaked in lard, nailed across the hole, yellowed and useless. There is no chimney. Smoke coils through the rafters like a snake looking for something to strangle. Your eyes water constantly. Your nose runs even when it's warm. The floor is packed earth, pocked with old holes and new rat tunnels. You spread rushes to cover it. But they rot fast and must be changed often, which no one but you will do. The ceiling drips in winter, sweats in summer, groans in spring, and gives up entirely in autumn. The bed is a pile of straw over a wooden pallet, crawling with life. The blanket smells like whoever used it before you, which is to say, not great. There is no privacy. You do not change behind a curtain. You change while your husband is busy tying his boots or not looking. You relieve yourself in a pot you will carry out later, with arms that already ache from everything else. The neighbors hear everything. You hear everything they do, too. Privacy is for the dead. The living share air, walls, and secrets they never chose. Your husband greets you on the first night with all the excitement of a man receiving a new shovel. He does not ask if you like the place. He does not ask if you're comfortable. He asks if you've ever cooked lentils, and when you nod, he grunts. That is your romantic moment. The fire is already low. The stew is already burnt. He hands you a ladle and goes outside to urinate against the side of the house. When he comes back, he says nothing. When he eats, he chews loudly. When he finishes, he leaves the bowl on the bench. You clean it because no one told him how. There is no ritual of housewarming, no welcoming party, no warm bread from the neighbors. Your arrival is noticed only by the women who peek through their shutters and murmur about the way your sleeves are sewn. The old woman down the path sends her grandson with a cracked jug and a reminder that her daughter died last year in childbirth. And aren't you a bit thin for bearing? You smile, you take the jug, you say thank you, you don't drink. Your duties begin immediately. You sweep, scrub, stir, mend, boil, knead, fetch, feed, and repeat. You must learn the quirks of this house the way one learns the habits of a temperamental animal. Where the roof leaks, where the dog sleeps, which step creaks, which shelf falls down when touched. You memorize everything because no one else will. Your mistakes are met with silence if you're lucky, or with muttered disappointment if you're not. You are told that your mother should have trained you. Better, you're told that this is how women are broken in, like boots or horses. The nights are cold even when the days are not. The bed does not warm fast, and your husband does not warm at all. He turns away after, or before, or not at all. You stare at the wall and listen to mice in the thatch. You do not speak. You do not move. You learn the contours of your new home by moonlight. The edge of the table, the hook on the wall, the place where the wind always finds a way through. You count your breaths until you lose track. Then you start again. And yet, you make the house yours, not by choice, but by repetition. You hang a bit of cloth near the hearth. You patch the leak with old felt. You gather lavender when it grows wild by the church fence, and hide it in your chest with a linen sleep. You whisper your name when no one is listening, just to prove you still exist. You begin to know where everything is. You begin to know what to say and when not to say anything. You begin to belong, not out of love, but out of muscle memory. You are not happy, but happiness is not the measure. Stability is, survival is, not being sent back is. And if you can keep the fire lit and the bread edible and the husband calm, then maybe, just maybe, this place will not devour you entirely. Or at least not right away. There is no such thing as free time. Not for you. Not anymore. Possibly not ever. The idea that a day might contain a sliver of stillness, a breath not tethered to a task, is as fantastical as dragons or nobles with clean fingernails. Your life now is a spinning wheel of repetition, not the gentle metaphorical kind, but the real one, with splinters and blisters and the kind of dull ache in your shoulders that even prayer can't distract from. You are not busy because there is always something urgent. You are busy because you must be seen to be busy at all times. Because a woman not moving is a woman inviting judgment or suspicion or something worse. You rise when the rooster lies. He starts crowing in the pitch black night like he has something to prove, and by the time you've stumbled over your own skirt in the dark, your day is already behind schedule. There is no breakfast. There is yesterday's crust. If you remembered to soak the oats, there might be something warm by the time your husband sits down. You don't sit. You hover, you fetch, you nod. You wipe your hands on your apron until the skin beneath is raw. You do not eat until the others are done. You do not speak unless it's to ask who needs what and how fast. The fire must be fed. The pot must be stirred. The bread must be shaped and prayed over like it's a sin you're trying to forgive. You make lists in your head. Not with parchment you can't read, but with fingers and pacing steps and a muttered cadence that holds everything together. Sweep, spin, boil, men kneel, smile. You lose track halfway through. You start over. If the butter churns too long, it turns sour. If the cabbage ferments too fast, it turns evil. If the wash water freezes in. The bucket, you must break it open with your own breath. And while you're doing all of this, churning, stitching, sweating, you must also look like you're not struggling. You must not sigh too loud. You must not wince when you bend. You must not complain when your hands crack from salt or frost or the endless wringing of things that never seem clean. To be a good wife is not to be efficient. It is to be tireless. There's a difference. Efficiency might get the job done. Tirelessness keeps people from asking why you look tired. If you find a moment, a brief second when no one is calling, and the pot is not yet boiling over, and the child is not yet screaming, you do not sit. You do not exhale. You pick something up, anything, a knife to sharpen, a bit of thread to wind, a corner to sweep again. Not because it needs it, but because you must be seen needing it. The worst thing you can be is idle. Idleness breeds gossip. Gossip breeds suspicion. Suspicion breeds visits from the priest, or worse, the neighbor women who cluck and whisper and never forget. You work through illness. Of course you do. A headache is not an excuse. Neither is blood. Neither is the way you're left. I won't stop twitching from exhaustion. You work with cramps, with fevers, with the kind of stabbing side pain that makes you see stars. If you fall, you are helped up and told to finish the chore. If you weep, someone says a prayer and hands you another bucket. If you faint, someone steps over you. If you die, and women do, in corners, with no announcement, someone else will take your place by sunset. There are breaks, but they are illusions. A walk to the well means dragging 2 buckets on a rope with cracked hands. A visit to the oven means hauling dough heavier than your firstborn. A moment in the garden means squatting in dirt too dry for mercy, too wet for peace. Even prayer is not a rest. It is a duty. You kneel on stone and mumble litanies through chattering teeth, while your mind is measuring barley and remembering that the goose still hasn't laid. The men in the village talk about fatigue like it's a guest that comes and goes. For you, fatigue is a roommate. It lives in your muscles, your spine, your temples. It is never gone. You sleep curled around it. You wake with it already pulling on your arms. And yet you say nothing because the first woman to complain is the first one blamed for everything that follows. A burned dinner, a colicky child, a cow that stops giving milk. All of it your fault if you were distracted or slow or sullen. And so you perfect the posture of movement. You learn to work without sound, without pause, without evidence of self. You learn to listen with one ear and scrub with both hands. You learn to sew in candlelight, to grind flour with a foot while your arms rock the cradle. You learn to braid your hair fast, to tie your apron tighter, to keep your sleeves rolled so people can see your elbows, evidence that you are, at all times, performing usefulness. There is no praise. There is only not being criticized. There is no celebration, only not being punished. There is no glory, only silence. The reward for doing your work well is more work. The reward for surviving is being asked how you make it look so easy. And when you go to bed, with knuckles swollen and your back screaming, you close your eyes and dream of waking in a world where one day, just one, you could do nothing and still be allowed to stay alive. But until that world arrives, or until the grave offers its final exemption, you will keep moving. Keep folding, lifting, rubbing, boiling, bending, nodding. Not because anyone thanks you, but because in this life, the art of looking busy is the only thing standing between you and becoming a cautionary tale. You don't know at first. There's no golden light, no swelling violins, no sense of miracle. Just exhaustion, heavier than usual, deeper, bone sick and breathless, followed by nausea that feels like punishment for something you forgot to confess. You think it might be the salted fish from market, or the turnips, which have been suspicious since Lent, but then you miss your blood, and then another, and then you stop mentioning it altogether because everyone already knows. They could see it. In a way, your hands shake and your face goes pale when someone boils cabbage too long. You are pregnant. You are not asked how you feel. You are told what comes next. There is no doctor. There is no test. There is no gentle confirmation delivered in soft tones and sterile gloves. There is a midwife, thick-fingered, soot-stained, always chewing something unidentifiable, who looks you over like a cow she once delivered during a thunderstorm. She nods. She says about time, or God's will, or it took long enough. If she likes you, she gives you a bitter herb to chew for the nausea. If she doesn't, she gives advice that sounds like a curse and leaves you alone with your fate. No one celebrates. Not really. Your husband might grunt. Your mother-in-law might tighten her mouth in what could be mistaken for a smile. The neighbors make vague sounds about blessings while looking at the size of your ankles and calculating odds. You are told to pray for a boy, repeatedly. If it is a girl, you must look ashamed. If it is another girl, you must look apologetic. If it is 3 girls in a row, people start talking about sin or weak blood or the need for penance. Boys are strength. Girls are mouths. You're not having a baby. You are hosting a hope. Your body turns against you. Your hips groan. Your bladder vanishes. Your belly swells, not round and glowing, but lumpy, sore a sack of fear and fluid. Your breasts ache. Your joints crack. Your appetite turns cruel, demanding salted plums and then retching at the sight of them. You crave things you cannot name and vomit things you do not remember eating. Your skin stretches. Your sleep dissolves. Your back forgets how to carry you. And still, the fire must be lit. The bread must rise. The animals must be fed. The man must be served. You are not excused. You are pregnant, not idle. Every movement is a risk. You are told not to climb, not to twist, not to lift heavy things, and then given a bucket of water and sent to the well. You are told to keep warm, and then sent out to gather wood. You are told to rest, but only after every chore is done and every mouth is fed and the floors are scrubbed and the neighbor's children have been shooed from your cabbages. If you complain, you are dramatic. If you fall, you are careless. If you bleed, you must confess what you did. Wrong. You are not allowed fear. It is seen as weakness, or worse, as distrust in God's plan. So you do not speak of the sharp pains that come in the night, or the blood you found one morning, or the silence you feel instead of kicking. You bury these thoughts beneath your chores. You carry them like another child, one that cannot be born. You pray to St. Margaret, to the Virgin, to the local bones saint whose finger is kept in the church. You beg for mercy, for protection, for endurance. But you do not ask for joy. Joy is for the rich. You ask for survival. The midwife visits again. She presses her ear to your belly and nods, or frowns, or says nothing. She asks what you've been eating. She tells you to chew mint, avoid onions, rub goose fat on your ankles. She warns you not to sleep on your back, or your side, or your stomach. You stop sleeping. She tells you stories of other women. Some gave birth in the fields, in the snow, on the road, behind churches, under carts. Some lived, some bled. Some screamed until their voices cracked open and never returned. You nod. You memorize every word. You are not learning childbirth. You are studying war. When the baby kicks, it feels like a stranger. Not joy, not magic, just pressure. A reminder. You talk to it when no one listens. You whisper promises you're not sure you can keep. You press your hand against your own belly like it might answer. You tell it to stay alive. You tell it to come quietly. You tell it you'll try to love it, even if it is a girl, even if it has your husband's mouth. even if it ruins your body and your chances and your one good shirt. Time crawls. Your ankles swell to the size of loaves. Your joints feel splintered. Your breath catches when you bend. You're not glowing. You are ripening like fruit left too long in the sun. You are watched constantly, judged silently, whispered about openly. You are expected to smile, to bake, to sew, to host, to endure. If you weep, you do it quietly behind the oven. If you scream, someone says she must be close. If you bleed too much, too soon, someone lights a candle and starts choosing a name in case the priest must baptize a corpse. And still, you go on, because there is no pause button. There is no maternity leave. There's only the wheel turning and you gripping it with every fiber you have left. Try not to fall off before the final hour. You are pregnant, and you will either live or you won't. The dice are already rolling. You just keep sweeping the floor. You don't know exactly when it starts. Not really. The pain begins so slowly, so slyly, that you convince yourself it's just more of the same. More cramping, more aching, more punishment from your own body for daring to need rest. But then it sharpens. Then it climbs. Then it grips the base of your spine like a vengeful hand and pulls. And, not from logic, not from learning, but from something deeper and older and soaked in blood. But the baby is coming, whether you are ready or not. And of course you are not. You are told to lie down, but there is no bed, not the way you imagined. There is straw and a blanket and the bench your husband once broke and never fixed. The midwife arrives wrapped in layers that smell of smoke and something bitter, and she brings with her not reassurance but business. You are not a woman. You are a vessel under inspection. She nods to herself, prods your belly, and mutters to God as if he were within earshot and in a particularly bad mood. She sets her tools on the floor. A blade, a cloth, a wooden spoon, a piece of string, and tells everyone else to get out. The room shrinks. It is dark, even with the fire. It is loud, even in silence. You are told not to scream, which of course means you scream. You are told to breathe, which you forget how to do. You are told that every woman has done this before, and you will too. Unless you don't, you try to focus on the floor or the ceiling or the crack in a wall where a mouse watches motionless, as if waiting for a sign. You make bargains in your head, with saints, with God, with the baby, with death. You promise to be good. You promise to be better. You promise anything at all if this just ends. The pain is not like anything you were told, because no one tells you the truth. They tell you about miracles, about the joy of life, about blessings. They do not tell you that it feels like your spine is splintering from within, that your legs will go numb, that your pelvis will grind like millstones and never quite come back together again. They do not tell you that you will vomit, sweat, sob, curse, and break apart before you even see a single curl of the child who is doing this to you. The midwife checks your progress like a baker checks dough. She tells you not to push, then not to push again. She slaps your thigh when you get it wrong. She pours broth between your lips like a penance. She wraps your hair in a cloth soaked with vinegar. You do not ask why. You do not care. You're trying not to die. Outside, the world continues. Someone is chopping wood. Someone is shouting at a dog. A child laughs impossibly somewhere in the distance. You wonder how the sun dares to rise on a world where this happens. You wonder if it is rising at all. Time bends. Your body becomes the only clock, and it tolls like a funeral bell. And then it happens. The child emerges, slowly, stubbornly, covered in everything that a soul must pass through to reach the world. There's a moment of silence, so deep it hurts. And then it cries, or it doesn't. If it does, the room shifts. The midwife nods. The cord is tied. The blade is used. The child is shown to you, briefly, a face, a wet fist, a purple scream, and then taken away to be rubbed with salt, wrapped in linen, measured against old expectations. If it doesn't cry, the silence lengthens. The prayers begin. A bowl of water is fetched where the priest is summoned. You do not get to hold it first. You are not the priority. You are the battlefield. The afterbirth comes next. No one tells you that there's more, that the blood keeps coming, that the pain doesn't stop, that the tearing might mean you never walk the same way again, that the midwife will examine you like a broken wagon and decide whether you need stitching or just another prayer, that you will lie in your own sweat and fear and wonder whether you're still alive or whether this is just how dying feels when done slowly. People come in eventually. Your husband, who looks at you with the mild panic of a man unsure what to say to the horse that just pulled the plow through a storm. The neighbor women, who offer soup and judgment in equal portions. The priest, who says a blessing and reminds you to name the child something biblical. You nod at all of them. You do not remember what you say. You are not there. Your body is present. Your soul is somewhere under the floorboards, catching its breath. And then comes the silence. Everyone leaves. The baby sleeps or doesn't. The midwife snores on a stool, her head tilted like a broken scarecrow. You are alone. You look at the ceiling. You feel your bones as separate things, unfamiliar and loose. You wonder what happens now. You wonder who you are. You wonder if you will ever stand again without pain, or laugh without guilt, or be anything more than a name scribbled in a baptism ledger. You try to remember the girl you used to be. She doesn't answer. But, and this is the unbearable, unholy truth, you live. You lived. You did not shatter, even when you wanted to. You brought forth life in a room designed by suffering. And no one will build a statue. No one will write a song. No one will even mention your name 100 years from now. But you did it, and in the dark, beside the fire, beneath the rat watching from the ceiling beam, that will have to be enough. There is no ceremony to mark the moment you become a mother. No candle is lit. No banner unfurls. No chorus of women rises in sacred song. 1 minute you are a vessel, a shaking body in a smoky room soaked with blood and boiling water. The next, there's a child, small, red, furious, breathing, needing, and now it is yours. That's it. You do not get time to process this. You do not get to rest. You do not even get a second to cry. The midwife hands you the baby like a pot fresh from the fire. And suddenly, everyone expects you to know what to do with it. You don't. Of course you don't. You hold it wrong. You swaddle it too loose, then too tight. You feed it too much, then not enough. It screams. You scream. No one answers. Your husband touches the baby like it's made of smoke and then leaves the room. Your mother-in-law hovers like mildew, correcting everything with clicks and sighs and long, meaningful stares. The neighbors visit briefly to remark on the nose, to speculate on its gendered meaning, and to suggest boiled fennel for your milk. Then they vanish. You are alone with a person who cannot speak, cannot sleep, cannot do anything except cry and break your body from the inside out. Because make no mistake, your body is broken. The bleeding hasn't stopped. The stitches burn. Your breasts feel like sacks of stones tied too tight to your chest. One side is hard. The other is leaking. You do not sleep. Not lightly. Not deeply. Not at all. The baby wakes every time you blink. It feeds constantly like it knows something you don't, that this world is not built for softness, and it must grow fast or be eaten. You rock it. You hum. You pray. You pace. You lose time. You forget who you were. There is no learning curve. There's only failure and survival. The baby has a rash. You are blamed. The baby coughs. You are blamed. The baby so much as whimpers during Mass, and you are whispered about as if your soul is leaking out through your child's nostrils. You must keep it warm, but not too warm, fed, but not spoiled, quiet, but not sickly, You are told 1,000 things and none of them agree. One neighbor says garlic. Another says goat fat. The priest suggests abstinence. You nod at all of them, then cry behind the oven. If you are lucky, the child latches. If you are not, your nipples crack, bleed, scab, and your baby wails with hunger that nothing can soothe. You try wet cloth. You try spoons. You try letting it scream itself empty. You begin to wonder if you are cursed. You confess things you didn't do just in case. You sleep sitting up with the child strapped to your chest in a sling of desperation. You stop noticing when your shift is stained. You stop caring when the dog licks the floor under you. You stop hearing your name when it's spoken gently, because no one says it that way anymore. If the child dies, the world keeps moving. That is perhaps the worst part. The bread still needs baking. The laundry still needs scrubbing. The fire still needs feeding. Your husband still asks for supper. The neighbors still speak of rain and goats and grain. No one stops, not for long. A few words, a look, then gone. Another name buried, another silence. Another woman rocking nothing and calling it God's will. If the child lives, you begin to understand the shape of forever. There's no finish line. No moment when someone says, well done, you did it. Now go rest. There's only more feeding, more cleaning, more sleeplessness, teething, crawling, walking, illness. Every milestone is a new version of fear. Fever, rash, swelling, bruises, coughs that won't stop, eyes that won't open. You sit by the cradle and watch the baby breathe like it's a miracle you must witness every night or it won't happen again. And it doesn't end. You think it will, but it doesn't. The baby becomes a toddler, and the danger changes shape but never leaves. They fall, they choke, they run toward horses, they drink from puddles, they eat beetles. You cannot look away. You cannot rest. You become eyes, ears, hands, voice. You lose yourself in their survival. You forget what it meant to be anything else. People call it devotion, but you know the truth. It is fear. It is guilt. It is exhaustion so vast it becomes religion. You pray, but not for joy. Not anymore. You pray for sleep, for health, for a good stool, for teeth that come in without fever, for a full night without crying, for the strength to go another day without breaking, for your child to live long enough to bury you, not the other way around. That's the closest thing to ambition you're allowed. And yet, somehow, you endure, not because you are strong, but because you are needed. And in this world, to be needed is to be shackled to a crib, to a pot, to a rhythm that eats your name and replaces it with mother. You carry the weight. You bear the guilt. You keep the fire lit and the child alive, and your own mind just close enough to sanity to remember the next chore. This is not sainthood. This is not beauty. This is not destiny. This is the work, and it never ends. It starts with a cough, a small thing, a sharp noise in the morning, a wet rasp at supper, the kind of sound that would barely merit notice in a healthy household, if such a thing existed. But it continues. It echoes. It spreads itself over the day like mold on bread. He lies back after chores, then before them, then instead of them. He pulls his cloak tighter, though the hearth is warm. He complains of chills, of aches, of something not quite right. And just like that, your workload doubles. Because when a husband is sick, or says he is, you become not just wife and mother and cook and cleaner, but nurse, interpreter, and silent witness to the unraveling of whatever thread he once held to usefulness. You listen to him groan from the bed you no longer share because there's no room for both him and his size. You serve him broth, thickened with flour to make up for the meat you no longer have. You fold cloths, dip them in cool water, press them to his head. He swats you away, calls for more. He sleeps and wakes and repeats the word fever like it's a spell. You do not know if it's real. You are not allowed to ask. Men are not accused of lying when it comes to health. Only women are suspected of exaggeration. Men are assumed honest, even when they whimper like calves and twitch when it's convenient. You watch. You guess. You weigh the limpness of his posture against the sparkle in his eye when you're not looking. You notice how he lifts a full tankard of ale but groans at the sight of the butter churn. You say nothing. The neighbors offer advice, of course. Mustard plasters, boiled onions, dried foxglove steeped in vinegar. A priest recommends confession, which he ignores. A widow down the lane suggests he just needs rest and patience, and then glances at you like maybe it's your fault for wearing him out. You nod at all of them. You thank them for their wisdom. You go back inside and stare at the man who now spends his days under a blanket muttering about pain and divine punishment while you haul water through snow. If he is truly ill, there is no doctor. There is prayer. There is fasting. There is laying on of hands, usually your own, while you try not to recoil at the fevered dampness of his skin. You feed him spoonfuls of gruel between chores. You wipe his mouth with the same cloth you use to scrub the bench. You listen to his dreams, which sound more like confessions whispered to saints he doesn't believe in. You change the linens, not because you have fresh ones, but because the old ones have taken on the shape and stench of despair. If he is malingering, you carry the cost. You explain his absence to neighbors. You drag his share of firewood. You tend the animals while he snorts about your technique. He critiques your kneading from the bed, then demands more stew. He comments on your stitching, then falls back dramatically onto his pillow, hand on forehead like a swooning maiden. You resist the urge to hit him with a ladle. Barely. You're not allowed to get sick. Not even a little. If your throat burns or your joints swell, you do not speak of it. You take more garlic. You rub salves into your own knees while crouched by the hearth. You swallow honey and lard and whatever else the crone behind the church is selling this week. You keep moving, because if you stop, if you rest, there will be no bread, no warmth, no order. You are the fulcrum, and he is the burden that once helped you push, now just sits on the cart. If he recovers, he tells everyone how he stared death in the face and beat it through sheer will and your excellent care, as if you hadn't nearly broken your back fetching goat dung and boiling cabbage for 6 days straight. He pats your hand. He thanks you once. He never lifts the pot again. If he does not recover, if it turns out to be the real thing, the kind of sickness that chews through men like rats through grain, then you become something else entirely. You become the widow, the cursed, the pitted, the one who must beg for mercy and also prove she didn't hasten the end. You are watched more closely. You are spoken to more softly. You are told to mourn, but not too long. You are told to be strong, but not too proud. You are told to pray, but not for yourself. But while he still breathes, while he still sighs and coughs and moans, you are suspended. You exist in a purgatory of labor and guessing, where you must work as if you were already dead and care as if you were a fragile, holy relic. You serve, you nod, you clench your teeth and lift the bucket and try not to scream into the cabbage pot. You survive because you always do. And deep down, under the guilt, under the fear, under the ache that has become your second heartbeat, you whisper a small, wicked hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow he'll feel well enough to chop some damn wood again. It happens in the middle of the night, or just before dawn, or in the early hours when the rooster hasn't bothered to scream yet and the fire's just ash. You wake, or you are never asleep. And the sound that used to be there, the groaning, the wheezing, the thick, wet cough that shook the rafters is gone. At first, you think he's finally rested, that he's simply sleeping, that maybe by some miracle he's over it. You move closer. You shake his shoulder. You whisper his name. He does not stir. And then you feel it in the coldness of the skin, in the stillness of the breathless chest. He is gone, and you are free, or something like it. But freedom is not the word you can use. not out loud. Not even to yourself, not fully. The body must be dealt with first. Death in the house means ritual, protocol, performance. You must light a candle. You must cover the mirror. You must send word to the priest and the neighbors and the men who dig holes in frozen ground. You must wail, or at least look like you wanna. You must tear your sleeve or smear ash or kneel in the dirt. Even if your tears are dry. Even if your shoulders ache more. From the relief than from the grief. The house is no quieter than before. People arrive quickly. Death is a public matter, and a recently dead husband is a village event. The neighbors come bearing advice, gossip, loaves of bread so dense they could be used as weapons. They cross themselves, they mutter blessings, they ask if you're managing. They do not help. They do not mean to. They're there to see how you take it. Too calm, and you're suspicious. Too broken, and you're weak. Too quick to clean up, and you're already thinking. About remarriage. There is no correct response. There is only judgment. The priest arrives last, slow and sanctimonious, to say the same prayers he says for everyone in Latin you don't understand. He sprinkles water. He waves incense. He mutters about penance and heaven and the mystery of God's plan. You think of how many times you begged that same God to fix what your husband had broken. He never listened. But now, with a few words and a shake of a censer, the man you cooked for, cleaned for, feared and endured is being handed over to eternal mercy like a lamb. You try not to laugh or choke. The burial is brief. They dig the hole shallow because the ground is hard and your husband was not particularly beloved. They lower him in. They cover him quickly. There is no gravestone, just a wooden cross that will rot before the year ends. You are told to mourn for a season. You're not told how. You're simply watched, and then the visitors stop coming. The bread runs out. The silence returns. And then you are alone, truly, absolutely, terrifyingly alone. But then the paperwork begins. Not that you have paper or a pen or a lawyer, but someone somewhere, the priest, the steward, your brother-in-law, wants to know who owns what now. The land, the tools, the livestock, the debts, especially the debts. If your husband owed grain or silver or chickens, you owe them now. If your husband had a brother, the brother might arrive and sniff around like a dog testing a fence. If he's unmarried, he may suggest remarriage. If he's married, he may suggest something else. You learn to say no without saying it. You learn to bolt the door. You are told you may return to your father's house, but that house has 5 mouths and 1 roof, and you're no longer a girl. You are a woman with a past, with a body, with a child or 2 dragging behind you like shadows. No one wants more mouths. They want hands. You can earn your keep, maybe by weaving, spinning, stitching, mending. You are worth something, barely. You are a widow now. A half person, a problem. But there is also this. No one tells you what to wear. No one tells you when to rise. No one tells you to fetch the ale or heat the stew or lie still and be quiet. There's no cough behind you anymore. No grumble. No hand slapping the table for bread. The hearth is yours. The bed is yours. The silence, however empty, is also yours. And slowly, like moss on stone, freedom grows. You begin to breathe differently, to walk differently. You stretch in the morning and realize there's no one to ask where you're going. You chop wood, you fix the roof, you sell thread at market. You laugh, once quietly and no one tells you not to. You do not smile often. That would be foolish, but you no longer apologize when you do. Some nights are hard. The wind howls like it's accusing you of something. You feel his presence in the corner of the room, in the dents in the bench, in the uneven nails he drove into the window frame. You dream of him, sometimes kindly, sometimes cruelly. You wake with your hands clenched. You whisper a prayer. Then you boil water. Then you feed the chickens. Then you keep going, because that is what widowhood is. Not an ending, but a different kind of continuation. You're still needed by the land, by the laundry, by whatever is growing in the garden, by the voice in your own head that says you can do this, that you have done worse, that you have finally earned a name that is yours alone. Widow, it is not a soft word, but it is not a cage. Not anymore. They say that men rule the village, but you know better. They own the fields, they shout in the square, they sign their names, or pretend to, on dusty scrolls held by churchmen and stewards. But the true kingdom lies in kitchens and bakehouses, behind hedgerows and over shared water buckets. The currency is not coin but whispers, and the queens of this realm wear aprons instead of crowns. Here, in the smoky corners of daily life, gossip is not just noise. It is influence. It is defense. It is a weapon sharpened on the whetstone of poverty, boredom, and survival. You learn quickly that silence is dangerous. Silence makes you suspicious. It makes people fill in the gaps with their own imaginations, and those are far worse than anything you might actually be hiding. So you speak, carefully, just enough. You ask how the baker's wife is feeling. Even though you already know, you mention that the tanner's daughter has been looking pale. Even though she's always pale, you observe with feigned concern that the steward's sister has been visiting the priest more often than seems strictly necessary. You do not accuse, you imply, and the village listens. You are not the only one playing. The game is ancient and brutal. Old women with too much time and perfect hearing. Young wives hungry for status. Widows with nothing left to lose. They all compete in the silent war of insinuation. Who is with child? Whose child it really is? Who watered their bread with too much envy and not enough yeast? Who saw a strange man leave a cottage at dusk? Who grows herbs not just for soup, but for other purposes? Nothing is safe. Everything is usable. But gossip is not idle. It is self-preservation. In a world where your worth is weighed by modesty and your survival depends on the goodwill of others, information is armor. You do not have wealth. You do not have title. You have ears. You have memory. You remember who smiled too quickly, who frowned too long, who didn't weep at a funeral. You hold these details close like kindling. When a moment comes, and it always does, you feed them into the fire. Gossip protects. If someone calls you strange, you mention gently that you've seen stranger. If someone questions your bread, you remind them, softly, of that time their goat went missing for 3 days. If someone suggests you are too bold for a widow, you wonder aloud where their husband really sleeps on market day. You do not threaten. You do not raise your voice. You plant seeds. The soil takes care of the rest. But gossip can also destroy. You've seen it happen. A girl too pretty for her own good. A woman too quiet. A healer too skilled. It begins with a murmur. She talks to her cat. She walks alone. She doesn't attend mass often enough. It grows. She is watched. She is avoided. She is spoken of in darker corners. One morning, someone finds a doll with pins in it, or a sickly child points and cries, and suddenly the woman is dragged into the square with her hair unbraided and her eyes wide with disbelief. Gossip, when it turns like a scythe. So you stay within the boundaries. You are not too loud, not too silent. You agree when agreement is expected. You gasp when others gasp. You shake your head when you're supposed to. You keep your secrets locked behind your teeth and only let them slip when the lock needs oiling. You do not lie. Not exactly. You rearrange. You reframe. You rehearse the art of being helpful while saying everything and nothing at once. There are alliances, quiet ones. You share a basket with one woman, a cup with another. You exchange favors, bread for news, stitching for warnings. You build your web one thread at a time. And you are careful not to trust too much. Friends can turn. Neighbors can shift. Today's ally is tomorrow's source. You remember who gossiped about you when your child was sick. You smile at her anyway. That too is part of the game. Men do not understand this world. They do not need to. They think themselves above it. Let them grunt over taxes and argue over pigs and puff themselves up at council meetings. Meanwhile, you know who is stealing, who is starving, who is sleeping with whom, and who will probably be dead before the next harvest. You do not share this knowledge for fun. You do it to survive. In a world that has given you no voice, you have carved one out of murmurs. And some nights by the fire, alone in your hut with the wind scratching the thatch and the dog curled at your feet, you think of how strange it is, how power, real power, doesn't shout or wear iron. It waits. It listens. It smiles with thin lips and lets the words do the rest. You may be poor. You may be tired. You may have nothing to your name but a spinning wheel and a second-hand cloak. But you have ears. You have a tongue. And in this village, that's sometimes all it takes to remain standing when the storms come. Every village has them, the idiot and the priest. One is loud, the other is quiet. One is feared for what he might do, the other for what he might know. And between them stands you, tired, stained, polite, and increasingly aware that in this world of dirt and fire and hungry mouths, survival is less about righteousness and more about keeping just quiet enough to avoid notice, just clever enough to avoid blame, and just invisible enough to avoid being the next sermon illustration. The village idiot is not always stupid. Sometimes he's just broken, born wrong, dropped as a baby, struck in the head by a cartwheel, cursed by someone who meant it. He roams the square mumbling, picking through dung, laughing at things no one said. He startles children and enrages fathers. He throws rocks at birds and blesses pigs with holy water he stole from the chapel. Some days he is harmless. Some days he bites. The men tolerate him like weather. The women fear him like fever. You keep your distance, but not too much, because the idiot remembers who spat at him and who fed him bread. And you have too many enemies already. Then there's the priest, Father Ambrose, or Father Thibault, or Father what's his name from the hill. It doesn't matter. They're all the same, wrapped in wool and sanctimony, eyes like cold nails, hands that hover too long when they give blessings. He speaks with the voice of God, or so he says, but when he talks about sin, he always looks at the women. When he talks about temptation, his gaze lingers on girls barely old enough to carry buckets. When he talks about obedience, he means silence. Yours. He knows your name, even if he never uses it. He calls you daughter or woman or child of Eve. He reminds you that Eve brought ruin to the world, that you are made from a rib and should therefore be bent like one, that your mouth is a gate through which devils enter, and your body a furnace that tempts holy men into ruin. You kneel, you nod, you bite your tongue until it bleeds, because he can do worse than insult you. He can label you heretic, temptress, which widowhood gives you freedom, yes, but it also gives you visibility, and visibility is a death sentence when the church is bored. You go to Mass. You sit where you're told. You lower your eyes. You bring eggs when asked, or bread, or a jar of honey if the bees have been kind. You confess sins you don't believe in, envy, sloth, desire, bitterness. You do not confess the real ones, the hatred, the despair, the whispered prayers for men to vanish in the woods and never return. You wear your scarf tight and your sleeves longer in summer, just so no one can say you think too highly of yourself. You mumble your amens like apologies. You nod when the sermon blames the barren wombs for famine, the sinful skirts for storms, the lazy hands for plague. The idiot watches you from the road. The priest watches you from the pulpit. You walk a line between them, so thin it may as well be a noose. You cannot trust either of them, but you must learn to use both. The idiot knows things no one else hears, who was in whose house after dark, who buried something behind a shed, who speaks Latin when they think no one's listening. You give him scraps and get riddles in return. You learn to decode. You learn to translate nonsense into warning. The priest, meanwhile, is a gatekeeper of approval, of burial, of forgiveness. You need him to bless your bread, your child, your roof. You need him not to notice too much. So you flatter him without flattery. You give him courtesy without warmth. You attend every feast day. Bring your own share if necessary. Listen to every homily as if it's new, even when it's the same tired tale about Lot's wife and salt and obedience. Some women try to win his favor. They clean the altar. They sing the psalms sweetly. They bake him tarts with more honey than their own children get. It works until it doesn't. Until one day he finds their hem too short, or their eyes too bold, or their belly too round. Then they're the sermon. Then they're the example. You do not want to be the example. So you exist in the narrow space left to you. You nod at the idiot. You curtsy to the priest. You bless your bread and your door in your own cracked hands. You keep your house swept and your apron tied and your secrets buried with the onion skins behind the privy. You survive, and survival here is holiness enough. You are not a fool. You are not a heretic. You are not a saint. You are something else, quieter, hungrier, wiser. You know that in a village this small, the difference between salvation and damnation is who remembers what you said 3 winters ago when the priest pig went missing and the idiot saw you near the fence. And so you smile, and so you nod, and so you endure. At first, you think it's just dirt, the kind that hides under fingernails and settles in the folds of knuckles after a long day of digging, scrubbing, scraping, peeling, patching. You wash, of course, in cold water and ash-laced water, in water that smells faintly of chicken and regret. You scrub your hand with sand when there's no soap, with lye when there is, with whatever is closest to something sharp and purifying. But it doesn't work, the grime stays, it fades a little, but it's always there, beneath the skin, in the cracks, in the cuticles, the color of labor, the signature of survival. But over time you begin to understand. It's not just dirt. It's the memory of everything you've touched. Manure, blood, burned crusts, soot from the hearth, smeared across your palms like morning paint. Your child's vomit, your husband's sweat, the sour fat you used to polish the hinges, the crushed herbs you chewed for cramping, the salted fish you gutted for supper, the teeth of which still haunt your dreams. The old woman's wound you cleaned with vinegar and a prayer. The newborn you, cradled, still warm and wailing. The stillborn you bathed, still warm and silent. It's all still there. Your hands are not just hands anymore. They are tools, weapons, records. The village midwife once told you, a woman's hands are never just hers. And you believed her, because yours belong to everyone, to the household, to the field, to the sick and the dying and the not yet born. You carry firewood, carry water, carry the weight of the season in your wrists. You knead dough until your forearms throb. You twist flax in a thread until your fingers go numb. You pick lice out of your child's hair with the same care you use to mend a priest's hem. No difference. No break. They are cracked now. Always cracked. Winter splits them open. Summer bakes them dry. The skin flakes, peels, sometimes bleeds. You wrap them in old rags at night. You rub them with tallow when no one's looking. You whisper curses and prayers into them like their ears, like they might listen and feel pity. They don't. They throb. They sting. They stiffen. But they keep working. That is their loyalty. That is their cruelty. You've stopped caring about how they look. You haven't felt softness in a decade. Gloves are for lords and saints. You've worn leather once, at a funeral, borrowed, returned quickly. Rings are wasted here. Jewelry is a liability. Something to snag, to lose, to tempt. Your fingers are swollen at the joint from years of hauling and clutching and wringing. Your nails bend inwards like the roof above your hearth, and your palms are no longer pink, or smooth, or clean. They're textured with the long, lived story of staying alive. The other women have the same hands. You notice when you pass the bucket or brush against them at the oven. Not one pair in the village is unmarked. They are maps of ash and salt. One woman's thumb is bent permanently from milking. Another has fingers curled from old breaks healed wrong. A girl who burned herself on a branding iron still carries the imprint like a signature across her palm. You all pretend not to see it. You all understand it too well. Clean hands are not trustworthy. Clean hands mean idleness or worse, entitlement. You see them sometimes, visitors from the manor, from the abbey, from the world that has towels and warm basins and linen cloths. They flinch when they touch things. They hold coins between two fingers. They recoil from chickens. You watch them and feel not envy, but suspicion. What have they ever survived? What have they ever held that mattered? The church speaks of purity, of cleanliness being next to godliness. But even the virgin in the chapel has chipped paint on her hands. You notice that once during a sermon you weren't listening to, her fingers are worn down by kisses, by weather, by time. Even she, it seems, has been worked to the bone. And yet, there is something beautiful about what your hands can do. They make, they heal, they protect, they lift, they bury, they stitch, they warm. They push the cradle and close the dead man's eyes with the same steadiness. You have delivered life and scrubbed away death, sometimes in the same hour. Your hands do not tremble, even when your soul does. They move without asking permission. They do not forget. One day you might die, in a field, in a bed, under a roof you patched yourself. And someone will take your hands and fold them across your chest. They will look at them, perhaps, and think how rough or how worn. But they won't know, they won't understand what those hands have held, what they have suffered, what they have saved, what they have endured when the rest of you had nothing left. Because in the end, no matter how many times you wash them, how hard you scrub, your hands will never be clean again. And that is exactly as it should be. You wake before dawn, not because you want to. No one in the village wakes because they want to, but because it's market day, and that means something close to sacred. The air is damp. Your knees already ache. The bread is still in your stomach from last night, heavy and thick as clay. But today you will leave the house. Today you will walk to the center of the world, which, depending on your legs, your shoes, and your husband's mood, is either 4 miles away or an hour's prayer in mud. You dress quickly. The good apron, the cleaner scarf, the shift with only 2 visible patches. You may not be rich, but you won't look pitiful. Not today. You gather what you have to trade, a bundle of dried herbs, a lump of cheese, a basket of eggs that somehow survived the night without being eaten by weasels. A bit of linen you spun during those rare hours when your hands weren't already claimed. It's not much, but it's something. You sling the basket over your shoulder, rub your eyes, and step out into the cold. Market day has begun. The road to town is long and cruel. Mud up to your ankles, stones that bite through your shoes, wind that wraps around your legs like gossip. You pass other women on the way, some younger, some older, all bent forward, all carrying, all walking with the same stubborn, resigned rhythm. You nod to each other. No words. Just the shared recognition of people who know what it means to walk 5 miles with a twisted ankle and still be grateful not to be barefoot. And then, at last, the market, a collection of carts, stalls, shouting men, and a smell that can only be described as livestock and onions having a disagreement. Chickens run wild underfoot. Children scream. Dogs bark. A man selling dried eels sings a song about saints and sausage that makes 2 nuns cross themselves 3 times. It's loud. It's filthy. It's the most excitement you've had in months. You begin your rounds. Carefully, you examine cabbages like a diplomat. You touch apples as if they might explode. You know which vendors cheat the scales, which ones water their ale, and which ones add too much bark to the bread to stretch it out. You know who talks too much, who watches too closely, who flirts with widows, and who overcharges girls who don't know better. You keep your eyes down, your basket close, and your tone polite, but not too polite. That's how you get swindled. You trade 2 eggs for salt, half a cheese for dried beans, a bit of thread for a crack comb that still works well enough. You flirt with the idea of buying candied fig, but decide against it, not because it's too expensive, though it is, but because the sweetness would be too cruel. You wouldn't want your mouth to remember that kind of joy, not if it can't have it again next week. You stop to talk, or something like talk. You stand near other women. You discuss the weather, which is always a mistake, the harvest, which is always disappointing, and the priest, who is always suspect. You speak in code. You trade suspicions like apples. Someone heard that the tanner's wife has been coughing blood. Someone saw the steward's daughter sneaking into the bell tower with a boy from across the river. Someone else has a cousin who swears by nettle tea to make a husband more obedient. You raise your eyebrows. You laugh once, out loud, and immediately regret it. Too much joy draws attention. You pass the soldiers posted at the edge of the square like bored wolves. Their armor clinks. Their teeth flash when they speak to young girls. You look away. You learn that lesson early. You hold your basket tighter and pray they don't notice you. They usually don't. You're not the kind they want. You are older, smarter, angrier. You sell a few things. You buy a few things. You walk the square 3 times and then 5 more, pretending to look, pretending to decide. You're not just shopping. You're being seen. You're reminding the village you exist, that you are upright, that you're not to be pitied. Not too much, not yet. You nod at the miller. You ignore the butcher. You squint at the sky like you're thinking about the weather, when really you're just tired and try not to faint. Then comes the hour when the sun slips just enough to remind everyone that they have chores waiting at home. The carts begin to pack. The pigs stop squealing. The shouting dies to muttering. You gather your purchases, what little they are, and begin the long walk back. Heavier basket, sorer feet, slightly less money, but also slightly more dignity. You have done your duty. You have survived the crowd, the noise, the stairs, the men. You have fed your household. You brought back salt. And for a moment, just a flicker, just a breath, you felt almost free. Almost like yourself, like the version of you that might have laughed more often, walked with her arms swinging, bought the candied fig, and not regretted it. But the wind picks up. The ache in your shoulder reminds you that your life isn't over. And therefore, neither is the labor. The house waits. The fire waits. The same bent spoon and chipped bowl and same sigh from the same man, if he's still breathing. Market day is over. And tomorrow is the same as yesterday, except now there is salt. And that is enough. You try not to get sick, not because you fear death. You've made peace with that since your first bleeding, but because you fear time away. There is no pause button for a woman, no sick leave, no mother to call, no priest who will stir your pot or mend your child's hem. When your body begins to betray you, when the cough settles in your ribs like a lodger who doesn't pay rent, when your throat closes, when your bones ache even under blankets. It's not pain that frightens you. It's the logistics. Because who will fetch the water? Who will knead the bread? Who will feed the goats? Or salt the fish? Or peel the turnips for the stew no one wants to eat, but everyone expects to appear by evening. If you lie down, the house grows cold. The children wander into mischief. The wash piles up. Your husband mutters. The dog eats something unidentifiable. The world forgets how to function without your hands holding it together and still expects it to function just the same. And so you ignore it at first. You tell yourself it's just the damp, just the wind, just fatigue. You chew dried mint. You drink broth. You mutter a prayer you heard once in a different lifetime. You rub your joints with tallow. You press garlic against your chest and smell like a curse for 3 days. Nothing helps. The cough deepens. The fever comes. You tremble at night, sweating under a blanket that smells like old bread and fear. And your dreams turn to clay. The midwife is too busy. The priest is worse than useless. And so you are left with remedies and rumors. The woman down the lane tells you to burn nettles and inhale the smoke. The widow who swears by sheep's urine offers you a cloth soaked in vinegar and whispers a charm in a language you don't speak. A girl with too many brothers brings a pouch of herbs that taste like soil and betrayal. You take them all. You try everything. Because desperation wears many masks and pride is a luxury for women who can afford not to sweat through their shift every night. And then come the leeches. You hate them. Everyone does. But they're always last. When the prayers don't work and the steam doesn't help and the goat's milk curdles in your belly, someone suggests leeches with the solemnity of a funeral toll. You've seen them used before, on children, on men who fought in wars they barely understood, on the priest's nephew who fell from a tree and never spoke clearly again. You've heard the stories, how they suck the sickness, how they draw the humors, how they balance what God, unbalanced. So you lie down, you bare your skin, that strange pale map of years you never counted, and you let the midwife place them. One behind your ear, one on your wrist, 2 at the base of your spine. They are cold, and then not. They latch, they swell. You do not scream, but you do weep, quietly, into your sleeve, because you know it is not working. Not really, but you have to pretend for the neighbors, for your child watching from the doorframe, for the part of you that still believes stories. Because stories are all you have, once the body starts to lose. And there are so many of them. You've heard about the healer who lives beyond the marsh, a woman with white hair and no shadow, who cured a boy of plague by spitting on him and whispering into a frog's mouth. You've heard about the ghost of the nobleman's daughter who appears at wells and offers rosemary for the price of a tooth. You've heard that if you place 7 dead flies in a pouch made from mouse skin and wear it under your dress, the fever will break by morning. You've tried one of those. It didn't help, but you did stop dreaming of fire for a week, which count for something. Eventually, the sickness runs its course, or it doesn't. If it's a cold, you sweat and survive. If it's worse, something that takes root in the lungs or behind the eyes or low in the belly where no one dares to name. Then you wait. You weaken. You prepare. You ask the priest to visit. You send your child to borrow a candle. You dig through the linen chest for the least patched shroud. You say goodbye with your eyes because your mouth is too dry. But if you live, and sometimes you do not celebrate. You rise slowly. You wrap yourself in whatever doesn't stink. You sip broth. You sweep the corner that's grown moldy. You say nothing of the nights you thought you wouldn't wake. You nod when the neighbor says, "You look better." You smile when your husband says, "Told you it was nothing." You wash the bowl. You feed the goat. You burn the rag you used to soak your fever sweat and never speak of it again. Because in this world, illness is not a chapter. It's a pause between tasks, a breath between storms, a test you pass by standing back up, by chopping wood even when your spine still hurts, by sewing with fingers that tremble. You do not get time to recover. You get through. That's all. You are not clean. You are not healed. You are not safe, but you are here, and you have bread to bake. You don't remember when it started. The whispers, the glances, the sudden hush when you entered a room that used to tolerate you. Perhaps it was after your 3rd surviving child, when the baker's wife had already lost 2. Perhaps it was after you spoke too confidently about herbs, or didn't flinch fast enough when the priest preached about Jezebel and temptation. Perhaps it was when your bread didn't mold that week everyone else's did. Or maybe And this is most likely someone simply needed a target. It doesn't take much to become a witch. They don't say the word at first. It begins softly. You know too much. You keep to yourself. Your goat gave milk all winter. Odd, isn't it? You don't cry at funerals. You were green on Thursdays. You look the priest in the eye. Once, the idiot in the square said he saw you talking to a bird. A child dreamt your name and woke up with a fever. That's how it begins. That's all it takes. Because the devil, you are told, walks among women. He doesn't bother with men. He doesn't need to. Men are already loud and weak and filled with fire. But women, quiet, bitter, clever women, are doorways. He finds them by their silence, their laughter, their wombs, their stains. The midwife who lost 3 labors this year says the moon is wrong. The air is wrong. The prayers bounce off the walls. Someone must be keeping the blessings out. Someone must be opening the window at night and letting demons in. You make a list in your mind. Everything you've ever done that might look like sin through someone else's eyes. The tea you gave a neighbor that stopped her coughing. The poultice you placed on your child's swollen ankle. The way you sang to yourself while spinning wool. The time you said you didn't believe St. Apollonia actually yanked her own teeth. The dream you had where your mother told you she forgave you, even though she died angry. You know none of it is evil, but that's not the point. Evil is what others see in you when they need to feel safe. So you adjust. You speak less. You smile more. You pray in public. You cross yourself 3 times, then 4, just to be sure. You avoid the woods. You stop gathering herbs that grow too far from the path. You let your bread burn. You fake a limp. You give your neighbor the stronger eggs and take the cracked one for yourself. You give and give and give until you're hollowed into something too boring to accuse. But it doesn't stop, because fear is hungry, and the village is always hungry for safety, for justice, for something to blame. And what is more blamable than a woman who survived too long, who outlived her husband, who didn't die in childbirth, who doesn't look crushed under the weight of her own spine? You have become an anomaly, a threat, a question, and the church does not like unanswered questions. They begin to test you. Small things. They ask you to recite the Pater Noster backwards. They watch how you react when the priest's shadow passes over your doorstep. They ask you if you've ever had dreams you can't explain. They check the birthmark on your thigh. They ask if you remember your baptism. They say these are just precautions. You nod. You endure. But you begin to understand that no answer will save you. No compliance is clean enough. No confession is ever enough. The girl with a limp says you looked at her leg and made it worse. The old man says you poisoned his bread by passing too near his window. A hen dies. A child stumbles. The sky clouds at the wrong hour, and the circle tightens. One night, you wake to find a charm nailed to your door. Twine, bone, dried roots twisted into a shape meant to ward off evil. Or to mark it. You stare at it. You don't touch it. If you remove it, you're guilty. If you leave it, you're dangerous. You do neither. You walk past it like it's nothing. You do not cry. Not because you aren't afraid, but because tears would make it real. You speak to no one. Not now. Not when you might be quoted, misheard, turned into the next parable about why women shouldn't read, or think, or survive too visibly. You wait. You work. You watch the priest's eyes. You learn the names of the saints invoked against demons, and you mutter them while cleaning the privy. You tie rosemary in your hair and pretend it's for the smell. You touch holy water with both hands. You burn your own herbs at night and call the smoke a blessing. You survive because that's all that's left to do. There is no defense, only delay, no escape, only careful pacing along the edges of the pit. You are not safe. You're not trusted, but you are still standing. And the devil, they say, walks among women. But you know better. The devil watches. The the devil waits. And mostly, the devil listens quietly, patiently, just like you. There is a moment, sometime after your third confession in a week, sometime after the priest frowns at the way your scarf is tied, when you begin to understand that the church is not here to save you. It is here to measure you, to weigh your breath, your footsteps, your neckline, your silence. It is not a sanctuary. It is a courtroom, a prison, a market stall where redemption is bartered for obedience. And the currency is always your compliance. The church says no. It says no to everything. No to dancing, unless it's at a wedding, and even then, no twirling. No to singing outside of hymns. No to laughter during fasting days. No to colors too bright, to songs too cheerful, to sleeves too loose. No to herbs grown too close to the edge of the woods. No to dreams. No to stories that don't begin with a saint and end in fire. No to thinking too long about the moon, or your own body, or why the bishop has a gold ring and you have blisters on your palms. You are told that you are born sinful, that your body is temptation, that your mind is a garden where weeds grow faster than grace. You are told that God is watching, that the saints are watching, that the angels keep ledgers, that every small joy, the extra plum you stole, the time you danced alone behind the house, the moment you thought about what your life might have been, is a mark against you. And you are told this by a man who eats meat in private during Lent and touches the bakers. Daughter, too often after Mass. But you nod, you kneel, you fold your hands until they go numb. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is being noticed, being named, being summoned. So you obey. You wear gray. You cover your hair, even though your scalp itches and your hair used to shine like sunlight through ale. You give up the scarf you love because someone said red is prideful. You walk to Mass through mud, through pain, through pregnancies and fevers and grief. And you sit still in the stone-cold chapel as the priest tells you that your suffering is noble, that your place is here, that your womb is holy, your silence holy, your pain holy, as long as you never complain about it. You do not ask questions, not out loud. You do not ask why men may read, but women may not. Why the virgin is adored, but living women are ignored. Why the priest needs a new cloak when your child sleeps in straw. Why your daughter must confess at 7 years old, but no one confessed to her before. You think these things in the dark under a blanket, with your face turned to the wall, and then you push them away like rot from good grain. Because to ask is to doubt, and to doubt is to open the door. And once the door is open, the devil walks in, or so they say. You suspect the devil needs no invitation. He is already here in the priest's sermon, in the steward's eyes, in the rules that change depending on who is watching. He does not wear horns. He wears linen. He wears a smirk. He wears the approval of those who speak in God's name and listen only to their own. And yet, you still believe, not in them. Not in the institution that made you afraid to hum lullabies, but in something deeper, older, softer. You believe in the quiet, in the candle lit at midnight for a child with fever, in the whispered Ave whispered by your grandmother before her breath gave out, in the warmth you feel when the bread rises well, in the sky when it breaks open with rain just after planting, in the strength of a prayer said not for show, but for survival. You believe in saints who were mothers. You believe in Mary not as a spotless statue, but as a woman who bled and wept and rocked a child in a world that never gave her enough firewood. You believe that holiness is not in the pew, but in the pot you scrub. Not in the sermon, but in the stitch that holds the hem together. You believe, fiercely, stubbornly, in something they forgot how to teach, that your life, however small, is sacred, that your labor is sacred, that the act of enduring without, turning cruel is, in itself, a miracle, But you say none of this. You keep your head down. You say amen. You let them bless the bread you baked. You let them judge the daughter you bore. You let them write rules and draw lines and speak of mercy like it's something they own. Because you know the truth. The church says no. But you keep going anyway. And there, in the silence between bells, in the gap between commandment and kindness, is the only yes you'll ever get. There is no such thing as a peaceful year. That idea of seasons unfolding in gentle rhythm, of harvest arriving on time, of babies being born and animals fattened and food simply being there. That is for the stories. That is for the saints' lives, written down by men who never held a hoe or watched mold bloom in a sack of barley. Your life is not a cycle. It is a roulette wheel greased with mud and ash and blind fortune. And most of the time, it lands on disaster. The famine comes slowly, like a rumor. First, a little less bread, then a little less butter, then none, then a flat, gray cake made from grain swept off the mill floor, mixed with water, prayed over, and eaten slowly to hide the taste of dust. The root cellar empties. The hens stop laying. The goat bleats for grass that won't grow. The children chew on their sleeves. Your husband counts lentils like coins. You boil pebbles for warmth. Pretend it's soup. You tell stories about feasts that never happened. You tell your daughter that chewing slowly will make it last longer. You tell your son that hunger is holy. And still, the priest eats. Still, the steward hoards sacks of rye in his cellar, padlocked, guarded. Still, the tax is due. You are expected to give what you don't have, to survive without complaint, to pretend that God's mercy includes mold and belly cramps and watching your neighbor's child die face down in a field. You burn candles for rain. You burn candles for sun. You burn the last candle and stare into the dark, stomach clawing at itself, thinking of bread and wondering which parts of you are most edible. When the food runs out, you eat things you never thought to eat. Bark, rats, nettles. You dig up bulbs you're not sure are poison. You roast leather straps. You chew wax. Your teeth go soft. Your skin grows loose. Your hair comes out in clumps. You sing lullabies with no words just to drown out the sound of growling bellies. You sleep with your back against the door in case someone thinks you're already dead. And then, fire. Not punishment, not judgment, not even surprise. Just inevitability. A knocked candle, a loose coal, a dry roof, and a gust of wind that turns a hut into an inferno faster than a scream. You do not try to save the furniture. There is none. You do not try to save the chickens. They are smarter than you, already gone. You grab the child. You grab the pot. If it is water, you run. You hear someone else screaming, and you don't stop. You know the sound too well. In the morning, there is nothing. Charred beams, blackened stones, a pot cracked down the middle like a skull. You stare at it and think about soup that will never be made. You do not cry. You dig. You salvage. You rebuild with the stubbornness of someone who has seen worse, because you have seen worse. And there is no fire that can touch what you no longer expect. Then comes the flood, not always literal. Sometimes it's the river. Sometimes it's a roof collapse. Sometimes it's just too much of everything. Rain, mud, sickness, filth, grief. The water climbs in through the floor. The rats climb in with it. You wake up soaked to your knees and cold to your bones. You try to move the mattress, but it falls apart in your hands. You try to dig a trench, but the earth laughs and fills it in again. You try to keep the children dry, but they are crying, and so are you. And nothing stays dry in this world, not even your hope. You wonder sometimes if this is what the end of days looks like, but then you realize it's only Tuesday. So you go on. You dry the clothes with breath and firewood that barely smolders. You steal a roof tile from the back of the chapel. You trade a bundle of mint for half a brick of soap, and you scrub the mud out of your own sleeves with fingernails that were not meant for clawing stone. You boil weeds and call it tea. You kiss your children on their sticky, pale foreheads and tell them tomorrow will be better. And you hope they don't ask when tomorrow comes. Because it doesn't. Not really. It just continues, hunger and damp and smoke and always something new to lose. And still you do not collapse. You stand, you mend, you barter, you wait for the weather to break. You wait for the rats to move on. You wait for the priest to stop quoting scripture and start handing out bread. You wait. Because if you don't, who will? You are not strong. You're simply what happens when giving up is not an option. And the famine, the fire, the flood, they do not ask permission. They come and go, but you remain soot-streaked, empty-bellied, half-frozen, half-hopeful. Still here, still baking the next loaf from nothing. You were never meant to live this long. No one was. Not really. Not the women. Not the poor. Not the ones who gave birth in dirt and bled through winters and watched their babies die before they had names. Old age is not a gift. It is a rebellion. It is a scandal. You are still here, and that confuses people. You've lived past your usefulness, past your fertility, past the shape they had for you. You have become something rare and unspeakable. A woman who cannot be married, cannot be bought, cannot be used, only endured. Your hair has gone the color of church dust. Your hands are rope. Your teeth, the ones that remain, are dull, crooked, and ache in the rain. Your knees speak louder than you do. Your back curls in on itself like a question no one ever answers. You walk with a limp or a cane or the favor of gravity. And still, you work? Of course you work. You don't get to stop just because your body wants to. You need bread with elbows. You spin with your knees braced on the stool. You tend to fire like. It owes you money. And every time you sit, someone younger assumes you're done. You're not done. You're just tired. People treat you differently now. Children stare, but don't speak. Men ignore you unless they want herbs. Women watch you like you're a walking omen. Not because you've done anything, but because you haven't died yet. And that makes them nervous. Some call you wise. Some call you odd. Some call you mother, though you haven't carried a child in decades. You learn to answer to whatever keeps you fed. The priest calls you blessed when he needs your help with the sick. He calls you bitter when you say too much in the wrong tone. You no longer confess. What would be the point? You've outlived your sins. You've outlived half the parish. You've outlived 3 stewards, 2 husbands, a war, and a fire. You've even outlived your shame. And nothing makes men more uncomfortable than a woman who no longer apologizes. Your body fails in small, spiteful ways. Your hands swell in the morning. Your ankles hum with pain. You forget names, not faces, never faces, just the words attached to them. You remember things no one else does. The way the river smelled the year the bread turned black. The song your mother sang when she thought no one could hear. The name of the girl who vanished and was never spoken of again. These memories stick to your bones like old honey, thick and dark and almost sweet. No one wants your stories. They want your soup, your thread, your silence. They want you to sit quietly in the corner like a holy relic, something to glance at, to nod toward, but never really engage with. They forget that you were once the girl who ran barefoot in the spring, who bled and baked and bore and buried. They forget that the hands now cracked and bent once held a dying man and kept him warm with nothing but cloth and fury. They forget that you survived not by miracle, but by never, ever stopping. But you remember, and so you become your own witness. You speak to the bread as it rises. You speak to the fire as it sighs. You hum to the cat, to the birds, to the wind through the boards. You say the names of your dead in order, in rhythm, like a spell. Not to summon them, just to keep them close. You are not lonely, not exactly. You are accompanied by the echoes of everything you've endured. Sometimes the young ones come, a girl with questions about herbs. a boy with too many bruises, and a mother who won't meet your eyes. You give them what you can, a root, a word, a truth. Not much, just enough to carry. And they leave thinking you're strange or sad or sacred. Let them. You were all of those things once. You still are. You do not fear death. You've brushed shoulders with it too many times to be polite now. If it comes in the night, you'll open the door. If it comes at noon, you'll serve it soup. If it forgets to come at all, well, then you'll keep boiling nettles and patching socks and muttering at the ceiling until the roof gives in first. Old age is not a blessing. It is not wisdom. It is not a storybook ending. It is a slow erosion. It is a daily choice to keep rising when every joint screams enough. It is breathing through the collapse. It is saying, I'm still here, not with triumph, but with teeth. And that, in the end, is your greatest rebellion. It does not come with thunder. There is no raven on the fence post, no chill that creeps up your spine like a warning. It comes as everything else has, slowly, quietly, without ceremony. One day you cannot lift the pail. The next, you forget why you walked into the room. Then your feet swell, your knees forget their promises, your breath becomes a smaller thing than it used to be, and you begin to sit longer than you stand. The work continues, but you no longer chase it. You let it pass. Unfinished. That is when you know. The others know too, though no one says it aloud. They come to visit more often. They speak softly. They bring you bread you cannot chew and soup you cannot taste. They call you by your name more gently now, as if it's a child in their mouth. They pat your shoulder too long. The priest comes, of course, he always does. He smells of mold and candle wax and speaks of heaven like it's the name of a village downriver. You nod. You let him anoint your forehead. You confess, not from fear, but from habit. You do not expect anything. You simply let the ritual pass through you like water through cloth. You are not afraid. Not because you are brave, but because there is nothing left to fear. You have already lost your children, your teeth, your voice, your body. You have already buried your love, your shame, your fire. You have already stood in the square while the rumors passed around you like cold wind. You have already knelt beside too many beds and watched too many eyes dim before yours. What else could death take that hasn't already been offered? You do not dress for it. You do not light candles. You simply lie down. One evening, after folding a shift you can no longer wear, after brushing crumbs from a table no one will sit at tomorrow, after whispering a name, not yours, and not knowing why, you lie down with your hands crossed, not like a saint, but like a woman whose hands have done enough. There is no struggle. Your breath fades like a song you hummed too many times to notice it was ending. No one sees it happen. That, too, feels right. You have lived your entire life behind curtains, behind doors, behind tasks. Why should the leaving be any different? The body cools. The house does not shake. The goat does not cry. The stars blink on as if nothing happened. The world does not pause. It never has. They find you the next morning, a neighbor girl, maybe, or one of the midwives, checking in with something warm in a cloth bundle. She gasps. She covers her mouth. She kneels beside you and says your name. Once, twice, then silence. The others come. They speak softly again. They call it peaceful. They call it expected. They wash your body with cold water and no words. They dress you in the good linen. They comb your hair. They fold your hands, which are still cracked, still hard, still permanently shaped by the labor of 50 winters. They place you in a box, simple, wooden, made by a man who does not remember the sound of your voice. The priest speaks. He says your name wrong. He says you were pious. He says you bore your burdens with grace. He does not know what you bore. He does not know that grace had nothing to do with it. He says you are now with God, as if you weren't carrying him with you all along, through every bucket of water, every scream of birth, every frostbitten morning with no firewood and too much sky. The grave is not deep, but it is enough. They cover you with soil like they do with seed. They cross themselves, they walk away, and that is the end of it. There will be no statue, no story passed down, no candle lit every year. In time, they will forget your name. Even your children, if they lived, will stop remembering the sound of your laugh. The corner where you sat will become just a corner again. The herbs you planted will wither and be pulled. The pot you stirred will be scrubbed and used for soup by someone else. You will vanish as you lived, thoroughly. But still, there is this, somewhere deep in the breath of the world, in the soft clink of spoons, in the whistle of wind under the thatch, in the salt of sweat and the hiss of fire. Something remembers. Something hums the song you never finished. Something holds the shape of your hands. And death, for all its finality, cannot unmake that. You were promised many things in life. Salvation, purpose, a place beyond pain. The priest said it often, behind the altar, over the grave, between mouthfuls of roasted lamb, that those who suffered would be rewarded, that hunger and grief and sleepless nights were just tolls on the road to heaven, that women who endured with humility would sit among saints and drink light like wine, that God saw everything, and one day, so would you. You were skeptical then, you're still skeptical now, because heaven, if it exists, must be quiet, not silent like the grave, not empty like the house after all the children are gone, but quiet, no shouting men, no crying infants, no roosters screaming at stars, no sudden, sharp clatter of a dropped pail, just space, a field where nothing needs weeding, a kitchen with a fire that feeds itself, a roof that never leaks, a bed that never creaks. You cannot imagine harps. You cannot imagine golden gates. But you can imagine sitting without being. Asked to rise. If you make it there, that was always the catch, wasn't it? If you bore enough, if you stayed small, if you never cursed aloud, if you confessed every errant thought, every flicker of doubt, every time your knees gave out and you wished the earth would swallow you whole. If you raised your children properly, even if they died, if you fed your husband well, even if he didn't deserve it, if you did not lie, unless silence was worse, if you did not envy, unless the envy made you more obedient, if you did not love yourself too much, or too little, or at all, you tried, you did, you crossed yourself, you murmured prayers, you fasted on days when you could barely stand, you confessed to things that weren't sins just to be sure you weren't forgetting one that was. You listened to sermons about fire and punishment while scrubbing blood from your linens, thinking, how much more fire could there be? They said God loves the meek, then made sure you had no other choice. And yet, if you make it there, to wherever there is, you hope it is not filled with saints who never bled or cried or swore in the dark. You hope it's filled with women like you. The ones who worked until their hands split. The ones who died alone but clean. The ones who loved without reward. Who lived entire lives inside 3 rooms and still managed to teach their children how to laugh. You imagine it now, slowly. Not because you're eager, but because there's nothing left to imagine down here. A place where no one needs you. Not out of cruelty, but because everything that once clawed at your name has gone quiet. You are not useful. You are not necessary. You simply are. No one watches your hem. No one counts your eggs. No one questions the birthmark on your shoulder or the time you stayed up past curfew whispering to the stars. In heaven, if it's real, there are no rules. Not because people are perfect, but because no one is punished for being tired. And you are tired. You dream of a chair, just a chair, not a throne, not a cloud, just a wooden chair that doesn't wobble, near a window that faces east. You sit, you breathe, You remember your name before it was stitched into the mouths of children and scrawled across the debts of men. You remember the color you loved before you were told it meant pride. You remember how your hair felt before it turned a string. You remember the sound of your own voice when it was just yours and not a command or a prayer or a lullaby. And around you, perhaps other women, not saints, not angels, just survivors. They nod at you. They smile. They do not ask for anything. No favors, no forgiveness, no proof. Maybe that's all heaven is. Not reward, not glory, not eternal light. Just a place where you're finally allowed to be a person. And if that place doesn't exist, then let them bury your bones deep and unmarked. Let the worms take their tithe. Let the wind have a last word. Because at least you know what you were, not a sinner, not a saint, but something far more miraculous. A woman who lived. There is no monument, no plaque nailed to the timber of a church door, no name carved in a glass, no song passed from mouth to mouth across generations of grateful children. Your life ends as it was lived, without announcement, without reward. The village forgets quickly. A younger woman moves into your cottage. The dog follows her now. The chickens don't know the difference. The hearth is swept. The floor is patched. The chair you once called yours is dragged to the corner and used for drying. Herbs, but something stays. Not your name. That's gone. Not your face. No one painted it. But something more important, the fact that you were here, that you touched this world, that you shaped it, however slightly, with your cracked hands and your stubborn spine, that you carried water and stories and children and silence, and you never once asked the world to be kind, only that it let you keep going, and it did, for longer than it should have, long enough that now, somewhere centuries later, someone is remembering. You don't know her name. She wears soft clothes. She has warmth at the flick of her hand. She reads by electric light. She complains when it rains for too long. She buys bread instead of baking it. And when her back aches, she calls it stress instead of sin. She has never bled in a hayloft or buried a child with her own shovel. And thank whatever gods listen now. She doesn't have to, because of you. She lives in a world you couldn't imagine, where women speak freely, read openly, vote, build, lead, write, refuse. She walks streets without fearing that her shawl is too thin. She says no and lives. She breathes without permission. And no, it's not perfect. No, it's not fair. But it is better, because you laid the stone under her foot. You did not write history, but you survived into it. You were the unrecorded miracle, the unnamed strength. You were not the queen, the saint, the sinner in the sermon. You were the firekeeper, the healer, the wall between children and the night, the one who stayed, who got up again, who kept going. And now, across time, across language, across every field you ever walked and every roof you ever mended, someone knows, someone sees, someone reads these words with warm fingers and clean water and thinks. She lived. She made it. I come from her. And that's the happy ending. Not one you got to live, but one you earned. You were never a story, but you are now.